I am delighted to have my next guest back with us. People were up in arms the other day, sending emails, flaming pitchforks. Where is Larry Klayman? Here he is. Larry, how are you tonight?
Thank you, and I apologize, Jason. It's been a very hectic period. You're my very good friend, and you're very talented. And welcome to all of your viewers who are great patriots.
And certainly no need to apologize, Larry. Everybody knows that you're quite busy defending the American people against the injustices of what appears from the outside to be a collapsing Department of Justice. Since we last spoke, President Trump narrowly avoided the removal that an impeachment could have brought. What have you got for us tonight, Larry?
Well, what concerns me is that they're not done. The left is not done. They're vicious. They go after not just the president, but everybody that supports the president. You're talking about not just Congress. You're talking about the deep state and the executive branch. You're talking about elements of the federal judiciary who are highly politicized. You're talking about bar disciplinary councils in District of Columbia who come after me because I'm a supporter of President Trump. There was even somebody on a hearing committee who actually is an avowed communist, if you can believe this, Michael Tiger. I came up with pictures of him with Ramon Castro and thank you notes from Fidel Castro. He had been fired by William Brennan when he was a clerk at the Supreme Court on the orders of J. Edgar Hoover and Earl Warren, who was Chief Justice at the time.
Wow.
It's a full court press to destroy everybody in and around Trump, and there's absolutely no doubt about it. And I'm concerned, and I want to make the clarion call, and I pray that it doesn't happen. I will do everything that I can to prevent it, but I want the president to be careful who he has around him, and he needs to have a loyal Secret Service contingent. It's most likely that they are loyal. These are very well-trained people. I even have some in my own family. But going back to the Kennedy years, there are a number of theories out there by a number of people. James Garrison in New Orleans, there was a movie about it. Oliver Stone with Kevin Costner, and others who have thought that the CIA was behind the assassination of John Kennedy because they viewed John Kennedy as weak with the Soviet Union, which is now Russia. And they thought that he had sold out to Castro in Cuba in the Cuban Missile Crisis. He, of course, removed our missiles from Cuba. Kennedy made a deal with Castro that we would never challenge his leadership, so to speak, for lack of a better word, in Cuba. And there are a lot of factors that kind of line up. And we know that Trump's been very critical of the CIA and the intelligence agencies. He even criticized them in front of Vladimir Putin in a press conference, saying he was more inclined to believe Putin about Russian collusion or the lack thereof than the intelligence agencies. So I want him to be very careful and protect himself and get the right people around him because the left is not done. And it's not just the left, it's elements, in the deep state who have their own agendas that frankly would like to see the president gone. So now there have been two failed coup attempts through impeachment and through Russian collusion investigations, Ukraine, the like. And, I pray that that's it. But I think the left will use whatever means they can to take the president out. And I want him to be careful. And I pray that won't happen. And whatever I can do to play my part by sensitizing people that our president is at risk is important. And we know, of course, that in our history, we have had presidents who have been assassinated, whether it was Abraham Lincoln, Warren Harding died a mysterious death. Many people thought he was poisoned. Ronald Reagan, there was an attempt. And, I just don't want to see that. So I want to raise this issue so proper precautions can be taken to protect this president.
Yeah. Well, I share your concerns, Larry. I think that Trump he's pretty aware. What do you think about, I don't know if people even have this at the forefront of their consciousness right now, but I thought it was kind of interesting that Trump's first speech as president was made in front of this wall of honor at the CIA, two members of the CIA. What do you think about that?
Well, I think at that time he was probably trying to make friends with the CIA, but we know that running the CIA during the Obama administration was John Brennan. John Brennan is a rabid anti-Trump person ripped into him. We know that John Brennan has himself engaged, well, head of the CIA in illegal surveillance, even against Dianne Feinstein, a Democrat. Many people think that John Brennan is a convert to Islam. That's out there. I don't know that it's been proven or not. Yeah, I don't know if it's been proven or not, but I mean, he's a very evil person. And these people, when they leave, him, James Clapper, they leave, their minions in power behind them. And, we've had a number of movies on that, 7 Days in May, those kinds of things. And I'm not saying that, I'm not blaming anyone, I'm not accusing anyone, I'm just saying, as they say in Italian, stai attento, be aware, okay, be careful, because these people, now that they failed twice, through legal or potentially illegal means, will not give up.
Yeah. A lot of people are very concerned that we haven't seen any indictments of any of these guys yet. I mean, there's many people who are Trump supporters. They are just like rabidly in love with William Barr. You and I, Larry, have done a number of shows evaluating Bill Barr's history and looking at his behavior. I'm not a person who kind of turns on the TV and decides if I like the smile on Bill Barr's face or what he said today. I like to know what this guy's history is. Is there any reason that you can think of, I mean, a plausible reason, other than the possibility that Bill Barr is a deep state swamp rat, any reason why it would take so long to indict Andrew McCabe, James McCoby, James Comey, Peter Strzok, any of these guys?
Well, it's not going to just take too long, Jason. It's not going to happen at all. Okay, and the reason, and I hate to say that I'm always right, but I'm always right. I mean, I've been doing this for in excess of 25 years. I know no one's ever been held accountable. I mean, the only one that ever had a finding that Bill Clinton committed a crime was yours truly, and that was in a civil context. Right. The judge who, I love, Lamberth, he's my friend, and I'm very grateful for what he did, but he had the opportunity to take Hillary Clinton out legally. He did nothing. He's had matters pending in front of him still with regard to Hillary Clinton. He does nothing. And in Washington, D.C., other than issuing, opinions that are critical, but in Washington, D.C., everybody has dirt on everybody else. And who is it that collects that dirt? The NSA, the CIA, the FBI. So they're all afraid of sticking their neck out. Otherwise, they'll have their head on the chopping block on the guillotine. So that's why nothing ever happens. But it just becomes a reality show. Go on Hannity, go on Tucker Carlson, go on Laura Ingraham or wherever, and make these bold predictions to boost your own ego. And from Fox's standpoint, they're happy to do it because that boosts their ratings and their advertising dollars. But nothing ever happens, and it won't happen. I guarantee you it will not happen. If Comey...
Larry?
McCabe, him too from the Inspector General. Nothing. Clapper lied under oath.
We lost you for a second, Larry. If Comey does what?
Don't expect Comey to be indicted. There was a recommendation by the Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, a bomb appointee, to indict Comey. It was a criminal referral. It's simply not going to happen. Look at Clapper. I'm no fan of Roger Stone. It doesn't justify lying under oath to Congress or anybody else. There's no justification for threatening a material witness. There's no justification for obstructing justice and claiming you don't remember that you have documents when you have documents. That can't be justified. Now, perhaps the 9-year sentence that was recommended by the prosecutors is too large, but you can't say that this is insignificant, that it doesn't matter. But on the other hand, you had Clapper lie under oath to Congress that he wasn't conducting mass surveillance in the intelligence agencies. He was the director of national intelligence. Brennan lied to Congress about the use of mass surveillance on some of the American people. These people should be indicted. Now, why is it that the president now is out railing against the prosecutors with regard to Stone, but at the same time is not pressing to have these people indicted? He is the head of the Justice Department.
Yeah.
And he can tell Barr, as he did with Stone, apparently, with regard to the sentence. He can tell Barr, I want you to conduct a real investigation, and if the facts show that they engaged in illegal surveillance concerning myself or Carter Page or anybody else, then do what you have to do. But where is the president on this? And where is the president? He comes out and he's actually made it worse for Roger Stone in many ways. I love the president, but sometimes he doesn't think things through before he talks. Like when he said, during the campaign, well, maybe Vladimir Putin can get Hillary Clinton's emails. That was dumb, okay? And that, gave a pretext for the Russian collusion investigation. Or when he talks to the president of the Ukraine and suggests that Biden should be investigated, he didn't need to ask the president of the Ukraine to do that. He could have had Barr do it. But it was dumb to do it with a foreign power when he just got through with the Russian collusion investigation. Now, what he did with Stone may think it's great. People may think it's great that the president intervened and told the Justice Department, apparently, to recommend a lesser sentence. And if you believe that he didn't do that, you live on a different planet, given the president's way of doing things. It's not illegal, but he most likely did it. But what he did was, with regard to a judge like Amy Berman Jackson, who hates Trump's guts, hates Stone's guts, hates my guts, hates Corsi's guts, hates any conservative, okay, he just, challenged her authority. And you can expect that when Stone appears on February 20th, he'll now get a bigger sentence than he would have had if Trump hadn't opened his mouth on that. So, I mean, maybe Trump's laying the foundation to pardon Stone. He probably is. But that was not smart. Now, what I do take offense at, and I sent out a podcast this morning. I do a podcast for 10 minutes every morning on Radio America. It goes out at radioamerica.com, at freedomwatchusa.org. It's on YouTube. It's on Spotify. It's on iTunes. It's on Patreon and other places. I said, Mr. President, you've intervened for Stone, but why haven't you intervened for Klayman Bundy and his sons? Right. In that case, his indictment was dismissed, and your Justice Department took an appeal of that and continued the political prosecution of my clients, these very fine people, the Bundys, who stood up to a tyrannical Bureau of Land Management and FBI, and then had to endure 2.5 years in prison. Klayman, sometime, for a while in solitary confinement. He was denied right of counsel. He was denied counsel of his choice, which was me. I had to play a consulting role. I represented him in other cases and do today. But why aren't you standing up for Klayman Bundy? Why are you standing up just for your friend Stone? Where are you? What are you doing? Because this is a miscarriage of justice. And, quote, figuratively speaking, the blood of Klayman Bundy can be on your hands. If this indictment gets overturned, he goes back to trial and is convicted and does life imprisonment at the age of 74, along with his sons. So I asked the president if you're going to intervene on something much more worthy than Roger Stone. Klayman's committed no crime. He's lied to no one. He hasn't threatened witnesses. He hasn't obstructed justice. Why aren't you standing up for him too? And your Justice Department, out of Las Vegas, Nevada, the U.S. Attorney's Office, a bunch of corrupt political hacks, criminals, in my opinion, took this appeal, costing Klayman, a lot of emotional distress. I'm defending him, and on March 23rd, we have the oral argument at the Ninth Circuit over this matter. Why aren't you intervening for Klayman Bundy? All you have to do is tell Barr, dismiss the appeal. Where are you?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, Larry. And, it's interesting. That's where you and I first met, at the Bundy trial there in Las Vegas. It's amazing that this is an ongoing, ordeal for the Bundy family. Has there been any direct communication? How can you? I mean, I know you're putting out the podcasts and you've got freedomwatchusa.org that people should go visit, but how can we get a more direct message to the president?
Well, we had Jeff Sessions. Jeff Sessions is a worthless attorney general, and for that matter, in my opinion, a worthless human being, because, he just stuck his head in the sand. I had been lobbying him to intervene. He said he would, but he never did. And then I wrote a letter when Barr became attorney general to him and the head of the Office of Solicitor General, Noel Francisco, the head of the criminal division at the time, and others, the U.S. attorney's offices, to look into this matter and to have the appeal dismissed. And they've done nothing, absolutely nothing. And it's an outrage. It's an outrage. Then again, Barr hasn't done anything on any ground. So to paint this guy as the legal messiah, you
It was
know,
crazy.
as Hannity does, as Fox News does, as other people do. This guy's 100 pounds of you know what in a 50-pound bag. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a disgrace.
it is. And certainly, our last show, Larry, was all about Barr taking a dive.
Yeah, and so all of a sudden he intervenes with Stone. Okay, he intervenes for someone who's convicted on 7 counts of perjury, witness tampering, and obstruction of justice, but won't lift a hand with Cliven Bundy, who frankly committed no crime.
So has the DOJ actually intervened, or what is it that Barr is doing and planning to do? I mean, we've heard a lot about Roger Stone in the past couple days.
Well, they've intervened because, and you know what? Barr didn't even have the guts. He didn't even have the courage of his convictions, because after either he decided on his own or did it at the instruction of Donald Trump to intervene in the sentencing of Roger Stone in the recommendation of the Justice Department, he didn't even come forward with a proposal. Apparently, from what I read today, is that his people simply said, "We think it should be a lesser amount. It's for you to decide, Your Honor." He didn't have the
Right.
guts to even come forward with a proper recommendation. So again, he's protecting his own big dairy air again, and doesn't want to stick his neck out, not even for that. And I mean, the guy's a disgrace.
Mm. But Trump seems to love him. He's always talking about him, glowing terms, and thinks he's doing great. Thinks that Bull Durham is
Well,
going to be great.
I love the president, but we've seen how many people he's put his faith in the past who have stabbed him in the back. And there aren't many around him that truly are his supporters. Kellyanne Conway is, obviously, despite her lunatic husband, assuming they're married, which is doubtful at this point, or at least living together, and I don't care about their personal life. Stephen Miller is very loyal to him, and frankly, I can't think of anybody else.
Hmm. Well, Ivanka.
So he's got a clean house at the White. He's got a clean house at the White House too. He's surrounded by a bunch of traitors. You did a meme a while back, or meme, whatever you call it. I speak French, so I say meme, which means the same. But you did one with them going around him and stabbing him in the back like Caesar. I mean,
Right.
that's what he's faced, and that's why, what he did in firing Vindeman and others recently was good. He had to do that. That wasn't retaliation. These people want to destroy him, and that's the fear that I have.
That's all the buzz on Twitter right now, is that firing of Vindman. They're saying even Hillary Clinton, the disgraceful criminal, she had a tweet saying that Trump is using the presidency like a tyrant and that he's seeking revenge. I mean, Vindman should be court-martialed, shouldn't he?
Well, yes, if you get evidence, he should have due process. But if it shows that he inspired to do this, didn't do it out of the goodness of his heart or principle,
Well, but even if
yes,
he didn't,
he should be court-martialed. He should be more than court-martialed. I mean, if he testified falsely, he should be prosecuted like Stone for perjury.
but I'm saying and I know you're not like a JAG officer or something like that, but as I understand the military, it's not a democracy. When the commanding officer tells you to do something, you don't question it. You don't let your own opinion or your own morals come into it. You do it. And
That's
if
right.
someone's given an illegal order, they can go to their superior officer. But I don't think you're supposed to go to the House Intelligence Committee and go testify in your uniform at Congress. That seems like a court-martial level offense.
I have great respect for the military. I represent many Gold Star families who had sons die in Extortion 17 at Benghazi, but the military code of justice is not exactly a great code of justice. You know that. Look at that guy. I forget his name. Maybe you remember that they tried to basically, string up recently about, claiming
photo.
that he had.
Whoop, Larry, I think you froze.
And it's not a system of justice that frequently metes out justice. It's very authoritarian. And
Yeah.
I know people who have been in the JAG Corps before. I had one that worked for me for a number of years, and he told me that when he first joined JAG, they had him doing criminal defense, and when lawyers get really good, and they get experience, then they make them prosecutors. So it's not a fair approach over there. It's heavily weighted in terms of the prosecution.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting because, Hillary Clinton had this ridiculous tweet where she's talking about Trump is using the powers of the presidency like a tyrant now to reward accomplices and go after witnesses who dared to speak against him. This should concern and anger us all. So, I mean, Vindman's
Well, I
not really
remind
a
Hillary Clinton.
witness.
I remind Hillary Clinton of the hack she put in as Attorney General, Janet Reno, who ran interference for both Clinton and her, Deputy Attorney General Eric Holder, who later became the Attorney General under Obama, two bigger hacks at the Justice Department they've never been. But I might add, the Republicans have had a number of them as well, Gonzalez under Bush and others. I mean, unfortunately, they put in politicians at the Justice Department. They're not interested so much in justice as protecting the establishment of both political parties and protecting themselves.
Yeah. I mean, this is a pretty ballsy tweet from Hillary Clinton. It's amazing how Twitter has become such a forum for politics here. As you said, we don't really have Barr taking any official action. He's just releasing these statements. It blows up in social media, and there's fallout from that. It's a sort of a new landscape.
Well, actually, it's an old landscape. Okay. In fact, no one's been held accountable in my lifetime at any level. The only person who was ever held accountable, you remember the Valerie Plame affair many years ago. Cheney was behind that. Okay, obviously, people knew that. But who went to prison? Scooter Libby, his chief of staff. So, they burn a middle-level person, but they never touch the higher-ups because there's, a unwritten agreement among the various elite in Washington, D.C. that we'll never be held accountable. Maybe we'll offer a sacrificial lamb from time to time so we can say we're doing something, but the elites walk off scot-free.
Yeah, and we've seen that happen time and time again. So what do you think is going to happen here next, Larry? It seems like the stage is being set for, we know that Adam Schiff and Gerald Nadler, they're just waiting for the next, piece of meat they can bite on to raise some new, impeachment charges. We've got dopes like Hillary Clinton and other internet lawyers like this guy Abramson, sort of laying out the case. They're all, Harvard University, Lawrence Tribe lawfare type people who are just waiting for the next opportunity.
Well, they are, and that's why, I urge the president just to take a deep breath before he talks again, before he does something again. This Stone thing, the intervention of the Justice Department, has already triggered Inspector General complaints by none other than Chuck Schumer, one of the most vile people in Congress, as you know, the minority leader in the Senate. And while that's not impeachable, there are going to be investigations. And I don't want to see the president bogged down. He's got a lot of important work to do. And the irony is with what he did with Stone is that he made it worse for Stone. So at this point, he's now forced to pardon Stone because Stone's going to get more than the 11, even Stone's lawyers, according to what I read, suggested 11 to 14 months in prison. Okay, they didn't say that he shouldn't get prison. This is his own lawyers. So I suspect that Amy Berman Jackson's probably going to give him somewhere between 3, 4, 5 years. He can get out earlier, for good behavior, if he engages in good behavior, if he doesn't threaten her or anybody else. He already did threaten her one time with crosshairs at her head, but, in a meme. So, the president didn't do his friend any favors there.
Yeah. It really would make a lot more sense for him to just sort of like wait until they do whatever they're going to do with Roger Stone and then act. People got to remember that Chuck Schumer went on to Rachel Maddow's fake news program and said that the intelligence agencies have 6 ways to Sunday to get back at you if that's what they want to do. I confronted Senator Schumer on an Amtrak train, Larry, and I mean, he was an absolute dick. I don't know that I've ever met too many people that are much ruder than Chuck Schumer, particularly given that I'm a constituent of his, and this was an empty train car where he was busily reading his iPad. He could have spoken to me. This guy works for us. So he's waving me off, telling me to go away. He had a Secret Service guy or some sort of protection detail sitting next to him that we pay for, and he just had no time to talk to me.
Oh, that's amazing, but it's predictable. I mean, I've seen it before. So, a lot of these public figures, I remember, this is off the point, but many years ago in Miami, I was having a haircut in Coral Gables at a place where I went to get a haircut all the time. And in walks Alice Rodriguez with some woman. And I said, Alex, how are you doing? I was trying to be
Baseball
friendly.
player.
Yeah, the baseball player. He just walked right by me like I didn't exist. I mean, that's an attitude of, very elite, powerful people that think they're better than the rest of you. And, you see it in all walks of life. And Schumer
Yeah.
obviously is one of those. Yeah.
And you know what? Alex Rodriguez and people like that also would not be in that position if it weren't for all of us watching baseball. I did a movie with Christopher Lloyd many years ago, which people will remember. He famously played Doc Brown in Back to the Future. And I was in a diner having breakfast with Christopher Lloyd in Lincoln, Montana. And so people came up to the table and, he was in the middle of eating breakfast and they wanted his autograph and he was super polite. And I remember saying to him, wow, that's amazing. And he said, listen, these people made me who I am. You can't ignore that.
That's true. I got a little story with Al Franken several years ago, back in Washington. I think it was about 2008 or 9. I was walking on Massachusetts Avenue close to the congressional buildings, and it was early in the morning. I was going to see my friend Armstrong Williams, who has an office there. And Franken walks by me. He was a senator at the time. And he looks at me and he says, Klayman, you're a joke, right? That's what he says.
Wow. Whoa.
And I said, where are you going now? He says, I'm going to vote on Obamacare. I said, well, good job, And I said, but you know what? You're a comedian. Unfortunately, your jokes aren't very funny. And that was it. I started laughing. But what a low-class individual he is, I'll tell you. There are a lot of them up there. They're very much stuck. I'll tell you something. I've never met a senator or a congressman who ever took money out of their pocket if you were at lunch with them. They all expect you to pay for them. They think they're holier than thou, and they think that somehow they deserve all of these different perks. And some of them were even my friend. I can't say that they ever took $1 out of their pocket. Now, when I paid, it wasn't to ask them for anything. It was because they were my friend. But, this is the way they are. They think they deserve everything coming to them.
So, Larry, we've got this litany of Harvard geniuses on Twitter who are, laying out the case here for people to pick up. Seth Abramson, I don't know who this guy is. Months ago or maybe over a year ago, he went on some kind of tirade against me, all false stuff. So I think he's kind of a dope. But he's saying, that the 4 Roger Stone federal prosecutors have now resigned. But that's not even accurate, right? They just left the case. They're still federal prosecutors, aren't they?
Well, they resigned from the case. And I'll tell you why they did that. You can probably figure it out, right? So that's a statement to Amy Berman Jackson that we don't approve. In fact, we find it beyond the pale that the president intervened with our recommendation. Now, who's going to wind up appearing on February 20th if, in fact, the sentencing goes forward? Judge Jackson may order an investigation of what went on. She may want an explanation in writing or otherwise before the sentencing. Wow. But who's going to show up? Some lackey, kid, who they're going to hold out as a sacrificial lamb at the Justice Department to appear in front of her. And she's going to be asking him, how did this happen? How is it that your office, or at least the Justice Department, put forward a recommendation for 7 to 9 years, and now you're saying it should be less? And they're going to put forward the most uneducated dimwit that they can find. So he's going to say, I don't know. I know nothing. I know nothing. Because I've seen it many times. I've gone up against these Justice Department lawyers that they put forward. They purposely put people in there that don't know what they're talking about, so they can't reveal what went on. Or at least if they did know, then they're lying about it. So it's going to be quite a show on February 20th. I'd probably be the biggest show in town.
Wow. Yeah, I think people will be lining up to check that out. I do want to remind people who are watching us right now on Crowdsource the Truth, Larry, that we're doing a YouTube simulcast, and people can also watch. We've got plenty of viewers over there on the Freedom Watch YouTube channel. If people aren't yet subscribed to Freedom Watch on YouTube. It's a good place to go to hear Larry's radio show and his podcasts and all the different things that he's doing. I hope that people will also support freedomwatchusa.org. Larry and his team over there are doing so many important things for the Bundys, for Dr. Corsi, Sheriff Arpaio, the citizens' grand juries, and all of that kind of thing. Larry, what else did we want to talk about tonight? I know you're busy traveling, and it's a rough schedule for you, but there's a lot going on. Any developments with Laura Loomer? There was a lot of difficulty, as I recall, the last time we spoke, finding a brave lawyer in Minnesota who would challenge the Attorney General there and Tlaib.
Well, we're doing that with regard to Tlaib, but watch what we do with regard to our case concerning Facebook, because we're going to be seeking to take discovery of people from Facebook, including Mark Zuckerberg, very, very shortly. Of course, you know, they defamed her. They called her essentially a domestic terrorist and said she was a danger to the American people. So they're going to be held accountable. But, you know, I haven't forgotten about all these things. Right now, I'm down here in Florida on other business. I have a number of hearings in various cases. Florida is a very good place to litigate cases, much better than the federal court. It's a trial lawyer state. Judges let cases go to juries much more. It's a plaintiff state. So I've been focusing on bringing lawsuits where I can. Here in Laura's case against Facebook is in Florida. It's much better venue than the District of Columbia, frankly, which is, you know, like walking into a witch's cauldron, a leftist witch's cauldron, as I pointed out at the first part of the show.
And of course, it's the appropriate venue because Laura is a citizen of Florida.
And she's running for Congress down here. So that's where she was defamed, and that's where she was hurt the most. It's where she was damaged. Generally, you bring a defamation case in your community, and that's what we did.
Yeah, well, unless you're Devin Nunes' lawyer, then you just make up a fake person to be in that jurisdiction so that you can sue anybody in Virginia. But that's a separate matter that if you were my attorney, I'm sure you would have just advised me not to say. Wow, that's a great picture of Laura. Well, people can vote for Laura if they're in Florida's 21st district. I think she's going to win, Larry.
Well, I think there's a good chance. I can't endorse her as head of Freedom Watch, but I can endorse her personally, and I do, because she's a very brave woman. She's taken on these radical Muslims in Congress. She herself is at risk. I pray for her. I've always told her to get security. There are lunatics out there today, and she's risking her life to run for Congress.
Absolutely. And as I understand it, Laura has a very capable security team. She's like the antidote to the AOC squad. And now it seems that AOC is like, locked at the hip with Bernie Sanders. What do you make of the Iowa caucus, the New Hampshire caucus, all this stuff with Buttigieg? It's kind of weird, isn't it?
Well, Buttigieg is an interesting thing. I'm glad you mentioned that, because just a few days ago, on the birthday of Trayvon Martin, Buttigieg, I call him Little Petey, and Elizabeth Warren defamed George Zimmerman.
Right.
I'm just paraphrasing, accused George Zimmerman of being a white supremacist over what happened with Trayvon. And we know, of course, that everybody knows, not anybody in this country that, frankly, is awake, that George Zimmerman was acquitted with the defense of self-defense. So for Buttigieg to go out there and play that race card and brand my client a white supremacist and tie him to so-called gun violence, we know what that means. Nice picture of little Petey there, is defamation. And Warren did the same thing. So they're going to be sued in the next few days. I actually have a draft complaint on my desk, and they're going to be sued for this. And you know what? They have no immunity. Buttigieg is not, he didn't make the statement on the floor of the U.S. Senate, so there's no immunity, and neither did Warren. So watch what we do with them, because we have to put an end to this division on races. And these people are whipping up division among the races, and we're seeking to unite it. And that's why I'm very proud of George Zimmerman for sticking his neck out again and bringing these lawsuits against members of the Trayvon Martin family, against the attorney that represented them, Benjamin Crump, who wrote a book, I'm paraphrasing, white genocide against colored people, and then, references Zimmerman in that case. He's been sued. The publisher of that book, HarperCollins, not coincidentally, is owned by the Murdoch family that owned Fox News. I mean, it tells you something about Fox News.
Yeah.
They've been sued. The state of Florida was sued for allegedly conspiring to present a false witness during George's trial. If he had been convicted, he would have done life in prison in all likelihood. And if he had been indicted for first-degree murder, he could have had the electric chair with old Sparky in Florida. So this is a very serious matter. And for Buttigieg and Warren to be playing the race card with somebody that's been acquitted and found to have done nothing wrong. And on the other side of the coin, let's take our hat off to Patrick Mahomes. He's not only the greatest quarterback in the United States. I was rooting for the 49ers, but I was still happy that he won because he's a real credit to the profession, not just a great quarterback. You know, they tried to press him to say nasty things about George. He said, I won't do that. You know, just because I'm black, you expect me to condemn this guy? And, you know, Kobe Bryant, who I also really cared for, went to my high school, you know, long after I did in Philadelphia.
Huh. What was
They went
that high
to him
school?
at the
Marion
time.
High School or something?
Lower Marion, yeah. And I went to the sister high school, Lower Marion. It's both Lower Marion and Harriton. But they went to him at the time that this whole Trayvon thing started, and they wanted him to condemn Zimmerman. And he said, you expect me to do that just because I'm black? You think I don't have my own mind, that I'm not independent? And, you know, I myself had been falsely accused of raping a woman in Colorado. You know, Zimmerman deserves due process. So, you know, I mourn the death of Kobe Bryant. He was not just a great basketball player, but he was a great person. And, you know, and frankly, there are more black people who have courage to stand up to this thing than there are white people. White people run away from it. You just call them a racist and they run for the exits. But Kobe and Patrick Mahomes stood up to this. And that's what George is doing. And somebody's got to break, you know, this cycle of baiting race wars.
Yeah.
And my other client, Demetrius Penny, he did the same thing in Dallas. You know, he sued, and he's African American, a policeman who was assaulted during the massacre a few years ago. He sued Farrakhan and Sharpton and Black Lives Matter, New Black Panthers Party. He was called the N-word. He was called Uncle Tom. He was called a house in. He and his family were threatened. You know, conservative and other African Americans have been braver than white people in this area. And so to use the race card against George, one of the few white people who's actually stood up for himself and isn't afraid and doesn't run away, is outrageous.
Yeah. We should also remind people, Larry, that Joel Gilbert has put together the really stunning film, The Trayvon Hoax. People can watch that at thetrayvonhoax.com. And if you haven't seen it, it's definitely worth watching. I think you can stream it live on the website. You can certainly buy it from the website. But this brought to my attention a lot of evidence in the Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman saga that previously was unknown. You know, Joel did an amazing investigation there, and it just shows you what one person with the limited resources of a civilian can do. The FBI, there should be no unsolved crimes, or it should be like a rarity. All of these people who are just like getting away without getting indicted, it kind of shocks the senses because Joel Gilbert can figure this all out using the internet and the phone book and all that.
Well, you're right, but Joel's also very talented. He's my friend. He's the one that uncovered this fraud of a phony witness being presented in the Trayvon Martin case, the trial of George Zimmerman. And he did a great job. He used forensic evidence. He got DNA evidence. I mean, you got to see it, and it's unimpeachable, no pun intended. And you know, we're going to be going to trial based upon what he uncovered and what we're going to get in discovery. And it was new information. Call it
prima facie evidence, right, Larry?
Yeah, well, even more than that, open and shut evidence. But you know, Joel did it out of the goodness of his heart because he doesn't want to see this race war either. And if you can, you know, break the back, figuratively speaking, of the Al Sharptons, the Jesse Jacksons, elements of the Black Lives Matter, New Black Panthers Party, Farrakhan, and show, you know, what a bunch of liars and demagogues they are, then we can hopefully unite the races in a much bigger way and stop everybody fighting with each other in that regard. But the Democrats know no shame, and they'll play the race card to the end, and they don't care how many people get killed or maimed because they're whipping up violence. It's despicable. And there are some Republicans that'll play the same game, not many, but mostly it's the Democrats.
Mm-hmm. And so Biden falls under the regular rule. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. No indictment, no investigation, not even for his crackhead son.
Well, you know, it's interesting because when Rush got the Medal of Freedom, talk about racists, Biden attacked Rush, implying that he was a racist and didn't deserve the Medal of Freedom. But going back to the 2008 elections, Biden, I'm paraphrasing again, I wrote an article, column in WorldNet Daily last week. You can see it at freedomwatchusa.org or WND.com. Biden made a statement about Obama at the time, saying that he had never seen a black who was presentable, could speak well, and in fact, stating that black people are not clean, that because they don't speak like white people, some of them, that they're lesser human beings. I mean, there's a real racist, and yet he accused Rush of being a racist. I mean, it's unreal.
Right. Not to mention some of the people that Barack Obama gave the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Mohammed Yunus, Charles Ortel was just telling us earlier today, he basically stole a ton of money, and Obama gave him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Obama himself got the Nobel Peace Prize for doing nothing.
Don't forget that I think Biden got the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He probably doesn't remember it at this point. I was listening to the radio today, and he was talking about how the results in Nevada don't mean anything, that he's going on to South Carolina. But Nevada hasn't voted yet. I mean, the guy is just completely mentally gone. I mean, he's a basket case. I don't wish him any harm. I hope he doesn't have the onset of Alzheimer's, but he probably does at this point, or he's going to get a stroke. But he's not capable of leading anything, and the Democrats are beginning to see that, which is why he just came in fifth in Iowa. He's going to do even worse, elsewhere. He's sinking faster than a rock.
Well, I certainly hope
he
gets
back to Trump again. It gets back to Trump, trying to get him investigated by the Ukraine. What was the point? It was a lot like Nixon, having people break into Watergate because of McGovern at the time. McGovern was 30 points behind Nixon. He had no chance of winning. There was no reason to stage that Watergate caper. And the president needs to start thinking clearly before he reacts. Because although he didn't commit any crime and although it wasn't impeachable, it created a lot of problems. But the byproduct was that it ended Biden's career for sure, and the Democrats now see it. They don't want damaged goods, and they know the guy, was involved in bribery and extortion in the Ukraine, and he's done. And he's done also because he's mentally incompetent at this point.
Yeah. Did President Trump mention Biden by? Sorry, what's that?
I was going to say I have a case against Biden because that I filed, and I have a hearing next week on that in Palm Beach because. Wow. He intervened with YouTube, as we allege, in getting my YouTube channel pulled down. After I did a radio show criticizing him and saying I was going to bring him before a citizens grand jury that you know all about. And his press secretary was doing that with a number of entities at the time. So we have a hearing with regard to Biden. I've sued Biden myself for interfering with YouTube and Google.
Of course, the Freedom Watch YouTube channel is back, and people can go to freedomwatchusa.org. You can read all the articles that Larry is publishing in WorldNet Daily and elsewhere. He's got links to his blog. You can read the cases that he's filing. And of course, you can financially support Freedom Watch, join the Justice League, and read up on all these different things that Larry is involved in. So, Larry, the thing I wanted to ask you, did Trump mention Biden by name in the call to Zelensky, or did he talk about investigating corruption? I can't recall. I'd have to look at the transcript.
I believe he did mention Biden, and there was testimony to that effect. Look, I mean, it's something that wasn't illegal. It's something that he had a right to do, but it was just dumb after being cleared of Russian collusion to do it at that point in time. You got to think twice. I mean, don't move your mouth, take action, okay? And the action he should have taken was to instruct Barr to conduct an investigation, to have the Justice Department do it. That's perfectly legitimate. The president is technically the head of the Justice Department. He's head of the executive branch. And it was legitimate. I'm just saying, think twice, Donald Trump. I support you. I love what you're doing for the most part. I'm behind you. I do believe that, I've never had contact with him, one-on-one because of Roger Stone. I believe that Stone badmouthed me with him. And of course, I'm here in Florida right now. I don't want to talk about it on defamation lawsuits that Dr. Corsi's brought and I brought against Roger Stone. So, it's a shame because I could add a lot. I think I could help the president. I've asked people to contact the president, just 15 minutes. I think I could be helpful. And I will say this, Jason, I was critical of his lawyers during the Russian collusion investigation for not being aggressive, for letting that go on and on. Although I like Jay Sekulow, I was critical of him. But I have to say, I think Jay did a very good job during the impeachment proceeding.
Yeah.
And the Republicans are very good at playing defense, but they're not good on offense. And in fact, they don't do anything on offense. But now they need to go on offense. And the president, after he was impeached, he was right. He said, we're going to have a meeting at the White House. We're going to decide where we're going. We're going to decide what heads are going to roll. That's what he was implying. And they've got to do that. They got to clean house. They've got to hold people accountable. And they can't be worried about the appearances of it in the left-wing fake news media.
Yeah. So I know you're very busy and it's getting late, Larry, but just before we close it out, I wanted to ask you about Rudy Giuliani's latest push. He's been doing what I think is a really great podcast, this common sense thing. I think he's up to the 6th or 7th episode. He's presenting evidence. We're really in an interesting time here where, just a few years ago, somebody like Rudy Giuliani would have had to get on Fox News. I mean, he's basically started his own TV station in the same way that I have with Crowdsource the Truth. What do you think about this Common Sense podcast and some of the information that Giuliani's been bringing forward?
Well, there are a lot of aspects to that. I mean, I think it's good if he speaks out. I hope that, he lays off the martinis before he does it.
He's advertising booze and cigars during the podcast.
I believe it. I believe it. Yeah, I mean, that's how he got himself in trouble, and that's how he got Trump in trouble. He's not thinking clearly either. I mean, everybody gets themselves in trouble at some point. But he used to go on Hannity. He was incomprehensible, talking about attorney-client information and other things. But he knows he's never going to be touched either. Rudy Giuliani, having been a U.S. attorney in New York, deputy attorney general in Washington, D.C., knows a lot of people at the FBI, and he's worked with them. And he's even employed some of them after they've left. And he can gather dirt on anybody he wants. That's how it works. FBI agents, and I have respect for FBI agents. I've represented them, but some of them, when they leave, sell their access to the FBI and they become private investigators. So they basically sell the fact that they can get information out of the FBI that they're not supposed to have. And, so people are afraid of Rudy Giuliani. He's not going to be prosecuted for anything, believe me. So he knows that. So he's out there.
Larry?
Pulling alcohol and cigars.
We've got a good comment actually coming to us. We've got a good comment coming to us from Para Despete. I don't know what that name means, but he's watching us on D Live. He says it's not a proper chain of evidence with Giuliani, which is correct, but he's basically counteracting what Adam Schiff is doing, right? Just putting information into the public domain.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect that that's the case. What's this guy's name? What? Paranormal?
This is just Paradise something. I don't know. It's a viewer on D Live.
Because we do live in the twilight zone, so it was no disrespect to this individual, but look, that's the game today. It's a reality show, Jason. You know that, and people throw out anything that they want to throw out, to further their own interests and their own careers. And it's time people started telling the truth and actually doing something, not just talking. Right. And Giuliani does not have that power anymore because he's been cut loose by the White House, at least officially anyway. But, if he can educate the American people in a positive way, I think that's good.
When you say cut loose by the White House, isn't Giuliani still Trump's lawyer?
That's why I love you so much, because I can say the truth, crowdsource the truth. We need to educate the American people. They're very well, they're not very well educated, except for, people that support us. The other people are out there, in la la land. And that's how these things happen, because there's a lack of interest. You die by the sword, and you live by the sword. And to some extent, it's helping Trump because no one cared about impeachment. No one was even watching it. But on the other hand, the fact that there was this misuse of our congressional powers should be of great concern to everybody. And let me say one other thing, is that there have been presidents in our history that should have been removed. Yeah. I'm convinced there have been presidents in our history who have ordered people being killed, frankly.
Absolutely.
During the Clinton years, 80 people died. I mean, was that all law of average? Most of them were material witnesses and such. and there has to be a way to remove a president, but you'll never, ever do it with impeachment. It's a flawed system. It's a dog and pony show in the end. And we've never impeached a president and convicted him. And we need some adjustments to our Constitution. And I hope that next year that we can put together a third Continental Congress in my native city of Philadelphia to bring in experts to discuss, how we can make a few amendments to the Constitution to make it better. And one of those amendments that I feel very strongly about is to taking away the lifetime tenure of federal judges and to remove their immunity. And because they feel that they can do like anything they want, and they have to be held accountable.
Absolutely.
And they're not held accountable. They don't even have qualified immunity. If you make an intentionally wrong decision, or you make a decision that is grossly negligent, you should be held accountable for that, because these judges are doing it because they are, frankly, the lackeys of the people that put them in power. Most of them, not all of them, but most of them on the federal bench.
Yeah. It was Paradise Pete. Sorry about that, Pete and Larry.
It's a nice name.
Yeah, right. Very good name. One last question, Larry. Someone's talking, I don't know if you know about this, but Rudy Giuliani's support of MEK. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Yeah, well, we'll leave that
What
alone
is it?
then. It's something that he should not support. It's some kind of, jihadi, Iranian kind of thing. I shouldn't say that because I don't know all that much about it. Lee Stranahan is the expert in that. And as a matter of fact, we're appearing right now during the time
Is that the Mujahideen? Is that the Mujahideen?
I don't know.
Well, the Mujahideen, while was declared a terrorist group, they're not a bunch of nice people, I can tell you that. I know quite a bit about Iran, having many.
Oh, you're right, it
Iranian
is. Mujahideen-e-Khalq, M-E-K.
Okay. Yeah, he shouldn't be supporting them. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with
so
that.
That's really questionable. I don't know.
Yeah, during the revolution, they played both sides of the fence. They were supporting the original Ayatollah Khomeini. And Khomeini viewed them as a threat. So when he took power, he started to eliminate them. So they're not loyal to anybody over there.
It's just amazing.
And they turned against the regime because of that. But in fact, they had originally been supporters of that regime and assisted in overthrowing the Shah. Who, in my opinion, was a great man. The Shah was a great man. Okay.
Well,
and Carter undermined him with Zygmunt Brzezinski.
I thought the Shah was killing people with this guard and selling all the oil to the United States and England.
Well, you've read the leftist media. The Shah, had some excesses. Sure, he had some excesses. I'm not justifying that, but he was fighting communism. The Soviet Union wanted to take that country over. It's on its border. He was fighting the radical Islamists. He allowed for religious freedom in the country. Even Jews could worship freely there at the time. He allowed for freedom of thought at the universities. And all of this was his undoing. In fact, his father was much more severe than he was with Iran. And he was the one that established, the Shah's family rule. But he had the Savak, but, the left has painted that into something ultra terrible. But look, when your country is faced with Soviet communists trying to take the country over and radical Muslims, uh, things are going to happen. And I'm not justifying killing people without cause, but the fact is, Iran was a whole different place in those days. Iran, by and large, was a democratic country then.
Hmm. Well, Larry, it's always great.
Other than the fact that he was not democratic, but he allowed for freedoms, is what I'm saying.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's always great to have you on. And next week at this time, we'll talk some more to Lee Stranahan about this MEK. We'll learn more about it. Normally at this time, we'd be having High Dive with Lee Stranahan on Patreon and Subscribestar, but Lee is a little bit under the weather, so I appreciate you being able to move your schedule around and join us tonight. I hope that people will visit freedomwatchusa.org. That's the main website for Freedom Watch. People can donate there. You can read all about what Freedom Watch is up to. You can listen to Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Larry, anything you'd like to say before we end the show for the evening?
No, I just want to thank you, Jason, as my friend and colleague, and someone who allows people to tell the truth. That's very, very important. And again, I'd like people to share, my broadcast today, your broadcast, my podcast every day. I do a 10-minute podcast or radio show, Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman, and go to freedomwatchusa.org and sign up for our Justice League and support our citizens' grand juries. We need to unite the people I hate to use a political term, at the grassroots level, because we do not have a government anymore. We don't have a government that represents us.
Yeah. I like this idea of another...
Trump. But he's isolated among a sea of people that frankly want to do him in. And that's how we started.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. So when this Continental Congress happens in Philadelphia, that'll be very interesting. I think there are some things that we need to change, and federal judges having lifetime tenure and all this immunity seems to be a big problem. We'll see what happens with Amy Berman Jackson. When will she respond? Do we have any indication?
I suspect in the next few days she'll issue an order for an explanation of what's been going on. But that sentencing on February 20th is going to be a ticket hotter than the Academy Awards, believe me.
Yeah. Well, the Academy Awards was a steaming turd this year, Larry.
With even more theatrics, I might add. So
that's right.
It's going to be fascinating, and no one wishes anybody any harm, but what Stone did was serious. It's not, quote, a process crime, and he needs to do time, some time, for what he did. Not 7 to 9 years, but some time.
We'll keep an eye on that. Larry, thanks for joining me tonight, and thanks to all the generous Patreon and Subscribestar sponsors. If you're not yet a sponsor of Crowdsource the Truth, please visit subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And please also make sure you go over to freedomwatchusa.org. I can't keep bringing you shows like this with great guests like Larry Klayman without your support and sponsorship. So please make sure you support the guests and sponsor the show. Larry, we'll have you back real soon. Always great to hear from you. Have a good time there with all the stuff you're working on,
Jason.
and I will speak to you soon.
We'll talk soon. Thank you, Jason. God bless.
Thank you, Larry, and thanks everybody for watching. Have a great night.